Happy Tuesday, dear ones. I hope you're all doing very, very well. And that Monday was as beautiful as you decided to make it for yourself. So as we are doing, we're continuing on with the second chakra, or the Sacral Chakra, the orange one, which is all about our self-gratification or pleasure and the right to feel and have pleasure. Okay, counterforce, remember, is guilt. So when we know that our guilt comes up, when guilt comes up on a regular basis, there is an imbalance in that particular chakra. So let's look at the balanced characteristics. If we are looking at that chakra, and remember it was developed between the age of 7 and 14, and when we're looking at that particular time in our life, we've really got to look at what emotions came up, what happened to us, what were our experiences. Do we have these balanced characteristics and then we're a-okay? Or did we experience traumas and abuses that will influence and make us see and feel differently about life moving forward because of those particular traumas and abuses? So balanced characteristics of our sacral chakra include graceful movement, emotional intelligence, the ability to experience pleasure unconditionally, okay, without I have to do this first before I'm allowed to be happy, or that I'm allowed to feel that particular pleasure. Are you able to nurture yourself and others? If you are, then you have a balanced character, you have a balanced sacral chakra, or that's one of the characteristics. Do you have the ability to change? Okay, or do you dig your heels in and that's it, I'm not changing, I'm rigid? Do you have healthy boundaries? So in other words, are you able to put your foot down and say, I'm sorry, but I'm not willing to go that far with that particular thing? And when you ask for something, to actually say, I've asked for that particular thing, please respect me enough to give it to me, whether it's space, whether it's whatever it is, or whether it is something that you don't want to do, whether it's something that you say, enough of that, I'm not going to be doing that. So having that healthy boundary is just as important as being nurturing. Now, if you do not find that you have these balanced characteristics, you might look at the time in your life and look perhaps at the traumas and abuses that you might have experienced. And these could include sexual abuse, whether it's overt or covert. And you know what? It could have been just one particular incident that you might even have blocked from your memory so that you do not remember it, but you don't understand why you don't have this ability to feel and have pleasure. Maybe there was some emotional abuse that happened during that particular time. Perhaps there were volatile situations, a lot of arguing and fighting in the family. Perhaps you experienced neglect, coldness, rejection. Perhaps you had a situation where you ignored. It didn't matter what you did. If you stood on your head and went blue in the face, it wouldn't have mattered because you still would have been ignored for whatever. And that thing that was going on in the other person, would you as a 7 to 14-year-old would have felt that it was somehow your fault, and somehow you were the reason of all of this. Because that's how we experience things as kids. Very often we think that why our parents are arguing are because of us or something that we did. So we need to look at what we experienced. And remember, this is not a blame game. We're not trying to blame anybody for anything here. We're just looking at our own experiences and what we need to let go of, and what we need to embrace, and what we need to realize to be able to love ourselves so much more unconditionally for whatever has come to in the past. We are allowed to release ourselves from a lot of the chains that we put onto ourselves at that particular time in our lives. Perhaps you've experienced the denial of child's feeling states. Perhaps you experienced emotional manipulation. Okay, perhaps you had a restriction of normal movement. Perhaps you looked at your friends and they were allowed to go to each other's houses until a certain time. They were allowed to sleep over, but you weren't. You had to remain at your house. And if somebody wanted to interact with you socially, they had to come to your house. And perhaps they didn't want to. So there you have, do I have pleasure in having my friends over? Absolutely not. Okay, perhaps you weren't allowed to sleep over at somebody's house. So you've got all of these things. Perhaps you had a very religious or morally severe upbringing. So between the ages of 7 and 14, you very often find that our puberty, we're going through puberty at that particular time. We're moving from being child and it's going into teenagers. So this is where our body's changing and growing up and becoming an adult. Yes, we're not an adult at 14, but these changes are happening within our bodies. And very often that's when women become women and boys are having to explore their own masculinity that is coming through, very often under the guise of, in the bedroom quietly, or nobody talks about it. Don't let anybody see how I am understanding my own sexuality and how I'm understanding what these feelings are that are happening within my body. So when you've got this religious and moral severity, it's anti-pleasure. Perhaps you experienced physical abuse, whether it was being smacked, corporal punishment, or whether it was a little bit more than that. Because remember, a lot of us who are growing up, we grew up with corporal punishment being a part of our lives. And that's not okay. Whether that adult was your parent or whether that adult was a master at the school or a mistress for that matter, in the hostel or not in the hostel, all of this type of stuff. Corporal punishment, you might think that, I'm better for it and I got through it, and having getting jacks on a weekly basis, that was just part of life and everything like that. It's not okay. It's not okay for an adult to use their physical power that is normally greater than a child's power against us, especially not from a mind point of view, and that's emotional manipulation, or from a physical point of view whatsoever. So physical abuse, alcoholic families, all of those traumas and abuses that used to come with those things, if we do not have a balanced chakra, those things are what has created the imbalance within your chakra. So when you have a deficiency, when you do not have enough energy in that chakra, you will find that you have rigidity in your body and in your attitudes. Okay, you're rigid. Nothing's going to change it. There's got to be some flexibility. And remember, healthy boundaries do not mean that you're rigid about every single thing. Okay, flexibility is also important in a respectful way, in a way that still makes sure that you're not effacing yourself. Fragility and fear of sex is also a big thing. And sometimes we do not even, because society encourages couples and everything, very often that frigidity and that fear of sex, it's never ever spoken about, and it's that silent thing that nobody talks about. And there are many people out there who just go through the motions and don't enjoy sex. You also might find that you have poor social skills. It's very difficult for you to be in a social situation. You don't know how to read social cues. You make assumptions about people's facial expressions and about what they mean, and then unfortunately misread the situation completely, and perhaps a comment falls flat. So basically, if you know that you have poor social skills, there is an issue here. You might have a denial of pleasure, okay? And we're talking about not being able to orgasm here. Let's just call a spade a spade. Some people are able to go through the entire motions and enjoy it, and then not allow themselves the gratification of reaching that climax. Perhaps there is an excess of boundaries, and people have rules and regulations. And sometimes, unfortunately, OCD does come into that, because you put those boundaries in place to make yourself feel safe. Fear of change. Some people just cannot deal with it. They just cannot do it. They have so much fear within themselves that they cannot change. They remain where they were so many years ago, and they do not evolve. Some of them try to evolve, and they get to a certain point that they are too fearful for the new person that they might become without these rigid boundaries that they feel are their skeleton that hold them up and support them, when in actual fact it's a false sense of ego that only does that. And what happens then, unfortunately, is that they revert back and they go even deeper into their shell of excess boundaries, fear of change, and of course with that comes a lack of desire, a lack of passion, and a lack of excitement. They might depress themselves even so much because they do not know how to feel pleasure in their lives and take pleasure from every single day, whether it's sex or not. Having an excess of this particular energy, we're looking at sexual acting out, sexual addiction, pleasure addiction, excessively strong emotions that are ruled by your emotions and only your emotions, hysteria, bipolar mood swings, crisis junkies, drama junkies. Everything's got to be a drama. You cannot have one day that's just calm, cool, and collected. Everything's got to be a drama. Somebody parks you in, it's a drama that gets dramaed all day long. Somebody looks at you funny when they walk on the street or doesn't let you pass on the pavement, and now all of a sudden you're upset about it and it's ruined your entire day. That is an excess. That is an excess of energy, and it shows that you're oversensitive, that you have poor boundaries, and you tend to invade other people's boundaries as well with your constant feeling that you are not good enough. So you tend to make other people feel that as well because you don't have a boundary with what's coming out of you too. You might even find that people who have an excess of this energy are seductive manipulators. Okay, they will hold a carrot, they seduce you, and it's all beautiful and everything, but the whole thing is just a manipulation. You might find that some people are emotionally dependent. They don't know how to feel their own emotions, and so because they've got such poor social skills, they will look to other people to tell them how to feel and what to do. And then, of course, obsessive attachment. Okay, attaching specifically to one person and being obsessed about it, being possessive about that person because that person becomes your crutch for everything. So we have now looked at what the balanced characteristics of the sacral chakra are, what the traumas and abuses are that you could have suffered, and of course anything similar to that. And then we've looked at characteristics of a deficient chakra and characteristics of an excess chakra. And we'll look at physical malfunctions, and we'll look at those journal questioning steps tomorrow. If you have any questions, dear ones, please direct message me or put it into the comment below this, and I will definitely be absolutely delighted to assist you in any of this with regards to your life coaching. Please remember that we're all works in progress. We are beautiful art forms. We are diamonds that have so many different facets, and we shine with the light that we reflect from others and from ourselves. So remember, dear ones, the 4 agreements, the 5 Reiki principles. Love yourselves unconditionally and keep doing that every single day. It only takes 40 days to make or break a habit. Make a new beautiful habit every day for yourself and stick with it. Stick with that 40 days. Make one small change and keep that one change for 40 days and you'll get it right. Lots of love.